Entry 27. It feels like the days are getting shorter here for some reason, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, I suppose. The place here looks nice at night. It almost feels surreal at times. A small, peaceful civilization that's just 50 meters up from absolute hell on land. I can hear the zombies moving around at night. You might think that it would make it impossible to sleep, but the sounds of distant footsteps touching the soil is actually somewhat ambient. And after all the shit that I've been through, it's a bit of a welcome change. You'll rarely hear about a dispute around here. Everybody has a job and they don't mind doing it. Hell, there aren't really many options though. People need to eat and shooting down birds doesn't seem sustainable. That's why, twice a week, they'll send out a hunting team of 5 to 7 in order to scavenge animals and plants. Remember those forest creatures that I was talking about? Well, apparently they're like a delicacy here. I almost spat out the meat when somebody showed me what I was actually eating, but still, they aren't that bad, I suppose. Other than that, though, not much to do around here. I've been on 2 of those hunting trips myself, and they've been easy enough, I suppose. I didn't really notice when we first landed on the island, but the zombies are really slow. If you keep a moderate pace, they won't actually touch you, and as long as you tread quietly, they won't swarm you. That's why we're advised to only use crossbows, and guns only in absolute emergencies. We've encountered a few strange creatures here and there, though. These include, but are not limited to, a tall, thin humanoid, nearly resembling a stick figure, and this 3-legged thing with what I can only describe as a rotating head. Yeah, that one was a bit freaky to look at. I tend to pass the time just playing cards with Brax and Smoker. I taught him blackjack. Didn't realize that it was that hard of a game to understand. They seem to forget the rules every third time we play for some reason. And well, if anything else happens, I guess I'll write again. But I don't know when that's going to be. Entry 28. I should mention that I'm not really keeping track of how many days have passed. I just don't see a point in it anymore, you know? But it's been a while, and I met a local girl recently. I'd just come back from a hunting trip, during which I saved one of the guys from getting his leg bitten off by a large crocodile-looking thing. Apparently, this dude was this girl's brother or something. When he told her what had happened, she ran up and asked if she could hug me, which I thought was pretty damn cute. She also doesn't speak English, so I got Brax to translate for me, but I've been spending a lot of time teaching her. In return, she teaches me her own language. It's one that I've never heard before, and rather tough to learn, I must admit. But the way that she speaks just makes me want to keep going. Who knows, maybe I just like listening to her talk. She looks to be in her mid-20s, I suppose, and has this dirty blonde hair and these light pink eyes that look absolutely stunning. She's, well, great, to say the least. I don't know how else to describe it. Oh, and her name's Jolene, by the way. Pretty similar to Jolene. From what I've gathered too, she was actually born on the island, in a village up in the mountains somewhere. One day, while she was a little girl, her village was overrun and her father tried to get her and her brother out of there. Eventually, he was killed by a swarm of zombies in an attempt to sacrifice himself so that they could get away. Her brother protected her for the rest of the way until they stumbled upon this place. She actually started crying while telling this story, and I have to say, it feels nice comforting someone instead of killing things for once. It's funny too, I didn't come here looking for love. In fact, now that I really think about it, I'm not really sure why I came here in the first place. Adventure, was it? Or was it just fear of living an ordinary life? Well, I can safely say that I don't have to worry about that anymore. You know, I wasn't planning on staying here forever when I first arrived, but Jolene's making a good case for it, I must admit. Even though we can barely communicate with each other, I've just never felt such a connection to someone, such warmth. In fact, I really don't like thinking about leaving her. Besides, I don't really see a way out of here anyways. But like I've said before, let's just see what happens. Entry 29. So last night was, well, interesting. But to be honest, it might have been the freakiest thing that I've experienced while I've been here, and that's saying a lot. So, I was having a nightmare, a nasty one too. I was being chased through the forest by a naked woman with grey skin, and her face, it was just 3 large gaping holes where the eyes and the mouth were supposed to be. It ran in this, erratic jerking motion that felt so unnatural that I honestly wanted to puke. And the fucking sound that it made, it was almost like a low-pitched shrieking, nearly croaking if you will. I remember finding myself standing up when I was awoken, being restrained by Brax. He was whispering at me to stop what I was doing. When I saw what he was referring to, I nearly had a heart attack. I was about to fall over the edge. I looked around and realized that it was too late for a few others. But the strange thing is, nobody was making a sound. They looked like they were trying to sleep but just couldn't, just laying there with their eyes open. As I asked Brax what the hell was going on, he simply shushed me. That's when I realized that even though I was awake, the shrieking was still there. It seemed to be coming from the forest edge, so I looked over. What I saw probably won't ever leave me. It was the woman from my dream. She was standing in some kind of obscure crouched position, screaming like hell. When Brax saw me looking at her, he pulled me away and quietly told me to just go back to bed until it was over. I complied, and I remember laying there for what seemed like hours. In reality, it was only about 20 minutes. I started counting the time again in an attempt to minimize thinking about the demonic noise. And when it finally stopped, everybody just still stayed down. I didn't really want to get up either, if I'm being honest, so I just did the same. It was only when sunlight finally seeped in through the thick clouds where anybody moved. What I didn't notice during the night, though, was that there were no zombies in our vicinity. In the vicinity of the woman, that is. And I'm guessing that those two are correlated in some way. And well, they're back now, feasting on the bodies of the people who sleepwalked themselves to death. There were some tears around the settlement that night as well, for sure. I met up with Smoker later that day and asked him about it too. He was paler than I'd ever seen him before, and he usually had a stoic demeanor, but not right then. He honestly looked terrified. When I mentioned the woman, he just held up his hand and told me that the other guards had told him not to talk about it. That if we ever saw her again, to just avoid looking at her and act like we didn't know that she was even there. I made eye contact with Kuntz and Lauren as well, but their expressions told me that they also didn't want to be reminded of it. Couldn't blame them, to be honest. But for some reason, I still had to know. So I went up to Brax and demanded that he tell me what the hell that thing was. Hesitantly, this is what he told me. That thing, the woman if you could call it, they refer to as the colorless spirit. Now, nobody knows what it is at all. They just know that you need to ignore it. You see, the first time that the settlement had encountered her was a long while ago, and they definitely learned their lesson. When she came out of the forest and started shrieking that insanity-inducing sound, some of the guards started yelling at her while others prevented the people from walking off the towers. Eventually, one of them ended up just shooting at her, and that was when all hell broke loose. The arrow pierced her shoulder and she just went silent. A few seconds later, she was joined by hundreds of others that looked exactly like her. They ran towards the settlement, scaling the towers at a disturbingly fast rate, and nobody could do anything about it too. About half the people there died that day, and it would have been more, but they were saved by daylight. As the dim light bled into the sky above, the colorless spirit started running back into the woods. From that day on, they realized that the best strategy for dealing with these things was to simply ignore them. However, it hadn't happened in so long that Brax had forgotten to tell us anything about it. And this was a bad experience, to say the least. As I write this, Jolanne lies, sniffling quietly in my lap. Everybody seems a bit more reserved now, more afraid to go onto the ground, but I suppose that this will change. I mean, we can't linger on this forever, right? Entry 30. It's been a while since my last entry. Hard to pinpoint an exact time period, but I'm thinking months. Anyhow, it took a while, but things are finally back to normal around here. In fact, we've actually constructed some new buildings, specifically a bathhouse and a theater. It's been a good time too. Me and Jolene write our own plays and put them on for the children, and they seem to like it. It's a lot more fun than throwing around balls, I suppose. We also reenacted Forrest Gump and even got Kuntz and Lauren to take part in it, and they loved that one. I guess that cinema really is an interdimensional language. Speaking of Jolene as well, her English has gotten a lot better. So has my Dacia, the language that she speaks. Besides that though, I really don't know what else to say. Everybody seems happier. I'm getting there as well. However, Smoker seems to be the exception here. Whenever I try talking to him these days, he just seems irritable and jaded. I kept pushing for him to tell me what the hell was going on, but he always said that it was just nothing. I kept pushing for him to tell me what the hell was going on, but he just always said it was nothing. That was until yesterday. For whatever reason, I couldn't sleep that night. With Jolene curled up by my side, I slowly inched my way out of the bed. As I got up to take a stroll around the towers, I spotted Smoker on the other side puffing a dart. I realized that I hadn't seen him doing that since we left the prison. I walked over to him and asked how he still had the cigs. Apparently, he'd stolen a bunch of them from the warden's office and stuffed them into a bag. He'd been smoking only at night ever since. "Sorry, man, don't really want to share them," he told me. "Rather keep it under wraps." He flicked it away, and I watched as it cascaded down right onto the zombie's head. It just grunted in confusion. Smoker followed up by sighing before looking me in the eyes. You like it here, right?" he asked. "I mean, I know you got your girl and all, but you really want to stay here forever, man?" I thought about it for a while, and to be honest, I really wasn't sure. I mean, this wasn't really an ideal place to settle down or anything, but there didn't seem to be any way out. So that's what I told him, and he just nodded. I asked him the same question after. "What about you? This is where you see yourself staying?" I already knew the answer to that, and he chuckled softly. "Fuck no, man. You know what I want, kid?" It's funny, even though I was in my early 20s, he still called me that. I guess that it had to do with him being nearly half a foot taller or something. He paused before continuing. "I've had my share of this place, this entire world to be frank, and I don't want to be a part of it anymore. I just want peace, you know. I want to be a neo-civitas." At this point, I'd been hearing about this place so damn much that I decided to finally figure out what it even was. So I asked him about it. "Well, it's a bright place in a dark world," he told me. "With all this hell around us, it's one of the only places where somebody can expect a semblance of normalcy. I mean, sure, this place is civilized, but look down." I did so, watching as the zombies meandered around. It's still fucked. In fact, I don't think any place isn't, other than Neo-Civitas. He followed up by telling me about what it looked like. It was an apparent paradise, miles upon miles of glistening skyscrapers that lit up the dark skies at night. It sounded to me like a peek back into the old world that I'd come from. Problem is, it was damn near impossible to gain entry if you weren't already born there. Some time ago, an outsider could have gained entry through the military recruitment station set up across various islands in a northern ocean. As it turns out, Smoker had tried enlisting in the infantry when he was younger. He had made the long and perilous trek to a smaller, very dangerous peninsula where one of those buildings was set up. Despite all of his effort, however, he barely failed the physical tests. The thing is, he would have been allowed to apply again a year later, but the government over there inexplicably barred any more potential outsider recruits just 3 months after. There were still a few other ways that you could become a citizen, but Smoker claimed that those were not feasible for him. Him telling me this reminded me of my times back at Dusk Blue. I mean, what if all of it was just a ruse like Paradise X was? What if Neo-Civitas wasn't really all that great? He just chuckled when I brought this up. "Yeah, I understand your concerns, kid," he responded. "But I've seen it. Inside the recruitment station, they had monitors set up, displaying the daily lives of citizens over there, and it may have been propaganda, but boy, was it beautiful. And honestly, It looked impossible to fake. He put his head down and sighed. It's as if this whole conversation just reminded him of a lost dream. Whatever, I heard him mumble. We'll see what happens. After that, he just laid down. I guess there really wasn't much else to say. I followed suit, going back to lying back down next to Jolanne on my bed. I didn't really get much sleep that night because that whole conversation just got me thinking. Is this really where I want to end up? Was Civitas a possibility? Could I bring Jolanne with me? Did I even want to do that? I don't know. It just feels like I really don't know anything anymore. Entry 31. Hey, you know what's fucking hilarious? It honestly seems as if months will go by where nothing substantial happens at all, only for shit to get really interesting really quick. Some time ago, I started hearing talks around the settlement about a hunting group that went missing some time back. But not even too long ago. Maybe about a week before we arrived or something. But that's why these guys were so willing to take us in. Apparently this was pretty rare, but not unheard of. When they did go missing, another team would usually find their dead bodies sooner or later, but for some reason, not in this case. Either they went real far or they were captured by something. Anyhow, when I first heard about this, I didn't think much about it. I mean, it couldn't really affect me, right? All that I learned was that I should be careful out there. But things got real crazy yesterday. So, it was my turn again to go out and scavenge for food and resources, but this time I was assigned to a team with Kuntz. Along the way, however, we ran into a bit of trouble. We ran into a swarm of those forest creatures again. I guess our subsequent shouting attracted a bunch of zombies, so they started chasing us too. But we were in pretty deep shit. We ran through the forest for a while, actually losing 2 of our guys before Kuntz spotted an opening up ahead. We crashed through it, coming into a rather large clearing. At this point, we'd pretty much shaken off the creatures, but the zombies were still after us. We laid low for a while, not making any sound in an attempt to throw them off, and eventually we did, and they moved straight past the clearing. When we got our bearings together, we realized pretty quickly that we were in uncharted territory. Now, it's not like we've ever covered new ground before, but this time, it was different. When we really looked around and evaluated the area that we were in, it became rather apparent that this clearing could not have formed naturally. There were flattened trees everywhere and what almost looked like tire tracks on the ground, leading to a man-made trail. It was peculiar for sure, so we decided to follow the tracks. I guess that we thought that it meant civilization, people out there who were no different than us, just trying to survive in this crazy world. As we walked along, we started to notice other interesting things. Shit like sharp wires tied to trees, blocking the path, and what looked like improvised bear traps of some sort. It got really messed up though when wooden spikes with zombies as well as other creatures' heads started appearing alongside of us. We'd started to realize that continuing on probably wouldn't lead us anywhere good. We were about to head back when a member of our group pointed out a head that was different than the rest. It was human, and apparently one that he recognized. Brax inspected it closer and confirmed that it did indeed belong to one of the hunters that had gone missing before we came. And now came the time for a decision. We could keep going and find out what happened to them and if there were any survivors, or we could still turn back. It was a tough one for sure. As the leader, Brax couldn't just abandon his discovery, but it was also highly unlikely that pursuing this would lead to any favorable outcomes. There were only 5 of us after all, and eventually we settled on going back and gathering more people in order to give us a better fighting chance against, well, whatever the hell this was. However, as soon as we turned around, we heard the distant sounds of an engine behind us, and it was coming up fast. We knew that outrunning it wasn't a possibility, so in a split-second decision, we backed up into the dark woods and waited for what was coming. Not long after, a beaten-down vehicle came into our sights. I couldn't really describe what kind of car it mostly resembled. All I can say is that it looked rough, man. Like the type of thing you wouldn't want to see if you were by yourself on a desolate back road. As it got even closer, We could make out more pikes with zombie heads attached to the roof of this thing. Safe to say, they didn't mean anything good. It stopped about 20 feet from where we were hiding. Two men got out, talking loudly to each other, like they didn't even care about attracting shit from the woods. As I got a closer look at them, it appeared as if one of them were wearing a ripped plaid shirt with dirty jeans. Now, this was surprising for a lot of obvious reasons. They also spoke with a heavy, undefinable accent, and their voices sounded coarse as hell. And, like the car, they also looked really rough. We watched, not really knowing what to do, as they picked up old traps and started setting up new ones. At one point, one of the men picked up a small rabbit-like creature that had been caught and started howling in hysterical laughter. I didn't really know what was so funny about it, but the other one joined in as well. And at this point, Brax nudged me in the sides. He pointed to the vehicle and whispered, "We're taking it." But before I could even react, he had jumped out onto the trail and raised his rifle at them. We followed after him, ultimately doing the same. Now, we expected these guys to show at least some indication of surprise or fear, or something, but no. They just stared at us for a second before starting to laugh again. "What are you folks doing out here?" I remember one of them saying in a stupidly obnoxious tone. "It ain't safe. Did you know that? For anyone." As soon as he finished his sentence, he slipped a small knife out of his sleeve and tossed it at Kuntz in one swift motion. It stuck him in the shoulder before Brax subsequently shot them down. Kuntz cried out in agony as he removed the weapon. Now, it didn't go too deep, but the tip of the blade seemed to be covered in a sticky green substance. And Kuntz sighed when he saw this. "Oh fuck." Brax took out a bottle of water and poured it out into the wound, but Kuntz winced like hell and said that it really burnt. It was obvious that we had to do something, but the problem was, we didn't know what. To make matters infinitely worse, we started hearing more engines coming up from farther down the trail. We piled into the vehicle, but by that time, it was already too late. As Brax tried to figure out how to turn on the ignition, I turned around and saw the other cars approaching fast. And they weren't stopping. My head slammed into the windshield as we were rear-ended hard. As my vision went blurry, I heard gunfire being exchanged before feeling myself get pulled out of the car and dragged onto the ground. As I started coming back to my senses, the sounds of hooting and hollering filled the air around me. I looked around me, seeing dead bodies on both sides before looking up at the person dragging me. He hadn't noticed that I wasn't unconscious yet, so I took out my spare knife and I slit his wrists. While he cried out in pain, I lunged at him, sticking the blade right into the stomach area. As he fell limp, I realized that the two remaining people he came with were still engaged in firefights with Kuntz. Brax had, unfortunately, been shot dead at this point. He was the only one left. While they were still somewhat distracted, I tried sneaking up behind them and taking them out that way. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work because they noticed and I was shot once in the foot and another bullet grazed my hip. The good news is that Kuntz managed to take both of them out while they were dealing with me. We both realized that there was no time to recover right now. As I walked over to him, I saw that he had 2 more knife wounds on his neck and thigh. They were also covered in the green stuff, but before I could say anything, he just shook his head. "Don't worry about it, man. Nothing you can do." I could tell that he was going pale, but ultimately, he was right. There was indeed nothing that I could do. As we were about to hop into the vehicle again, I heard something, a sound coming from the car that had rear-ended us, almost like a muffled cry or something. I told Kuntz to try and start the engine while I went to go and check it out. As I got closer, I could tell that it was coming from the trunk. Cautious as hell, I opened it, and I can't think of anything that I could have found that would have been more surprising, because it was fucking Kaganori. I genuinely thought that he died back in Paradise X. He was bound and gagged, looked beaten up as hell. He was also missing an eye. He was stuffed in between 2 other limp bodies, but I could tell that he was still certainly alive. The look in his last remaining eye just sent a shiver down my spine. He'd obviously been through a hell of a lot. I got him out of the trunk and untied him. We had no time to talk as the sound of engines in the distance started up again. As we stumbled over to the vehicle that we were going to use, Kuntz finally got it going. As we went in, Kuntz looked at Kaganori and then turned to me. "Who the hell is this guy?" In between breaths, I just told him to go. I could see a large shadow moving around in the woods beside us, and the cars behind us were getting louder. He didn't need to be told twice, and it's a good thing that Kuntz has a pretty decent memory because we made it back to the settlement without problems and without being followed. After I explained what the hell had happened to everybody, I brought them to the infirmary. I only needed a few bandages, but here's the crazy part. Everybody seemed to recognize Kaganori, said that he was one of the hunters that had been missing. But before I could get an explanation out of him, he just went unconscious. However, he is stable, which is good, just malnourished. They're actually tending to him right now. Kuntz, on the other hand, well, he's definitely not looking so good. His skin's nearly gone translucent, and all of his veins have become varicose. Nobody knows how to treat him, and everybody's also in dismay at the loss of Brax and the state of Kaganori. I guess that it became evident to everyone that we didn't have only monsters to fear. Our fellow man wasn't so safe either. The only thing that's really keeping me sane right now is the company of Jolene. If she wasn't here, I think I might have just lost it at this point. As you can tell, a lot of shit has just happened, and I don't really like any of it. Especially with what Kaganori whispered to me just before he passed out.
Ross found something, man. Something fucked up. We were wrong about this place. It isn't an alternate reality. It's our own.
I've been having a hard time trying to wrap my head around Kaganori's words. I mean, it couldn't be right. How the hell could the world have come to this? Well, I didn't need to wait much longer for further explanations because Kaganori woke a few hours later. After devouring some forest creature meat, he finally told me and Lauren how the hell he ended up here. As it turns out, he went into hiding in Paradise X after our initial break-in, but since the whole city was kind of a mess to begin with, he was never actually caught. He tried staying hidden on the streets for a few days before he started going delirious from the lack of food in his system, and eventually somebody stumbled upon him singing to himself in the alleyway. The guy took him into his apartment and fed him some energy bars. Those things were fucking vile, he told me. But you gotta eat something, right? The guy, named Ace, was nice enough to let him stay, but from the way that he described it, the place sounded like absolute hell. While there was running water, it was scalding for some reason. In addition, AC wasn't really a feasible amenity, so there were sweating buckets in there. But the worst part was the neighbor. Ace explained that he didn't exactly know what was in the room next to them, but they weren't supposed to risk letting it out. That meant that at night, they were forced to listen to something stomp around next to them while letting out a ghoulish wail. And for whatever reason, it only moved around at night. Eventually, Kaganori started working at a food production factory in order to help with the rent. It was the same one Ace was employed at. It was easy for him to land the job because the staff turnover was staggeringly high. I almost gagged when he told me what those bars were actually made out of as well. But anyways, a few weeks pass and he finds himself walking alone at night. But even though the place was lawless, crime, surprisingly, wasn't really a huge problem. However, I guess it made sense because everybody in that place was essentially a walking shell, just a ghost wandering around in hell. Nobody would really bother trying to rob anybody else because it just wasn't worth it. As he's about halfway back to the apartment, he spots somebody up ahead. In any other instance, he wouldn't have cared, but this person seemed familiar. It was Rust. He caught up to him and they started talking. They were both about as equally surprised to see each other. But when he asked Rust about how he'd gotten here, his demeanor soured. Apparently, the settlement that we'd first stumbled upon years ago was decimated by the Paradise X soldiers. The reason was unclear, but it probably had something to do with our break-in. He said that he'd even seen innocent children get slaughtered in front of his very eyes. And this was not pleasant for me to hear, of course. I mean, I felt like I already had too much blood on my hands, but fucking hell. Anyways, as it was about to be his turn, he tried reasoning his way out of the death. He claimed that he had skills that could be useful to them. This was true, of course. The guy had 3 engineering degrees. After an extensive period of pleading, they decided to give him a chance. There was a helicopter that needed work, and nobody over there had the technical skill to do it. If he could fix it within a month, then he'd be spared. If not, well, you get the picture. It took him 29 days too, but he finally did it. After that, he was essentially employed as a mechanical engineer. However, he wasn't planning on staying, obviously. He told Kaganori that he had something big in mind. What that was exactly, Kaganori would just have to wait to find out. Rust instructed him to survive for 2 more weeks before meeting him at his place. Yeah, that was all that he told me, Kaganori stated. I just trusted him, but there was nothing else I could do, you know? He waited, just trudging along the next couple of weeks before knocking on Rust's door. He didn't say much when he opened up, just told Kaganori to follow him, that the plan was already in action. He led him to the factory where he'd apparently been working at. The soldiers guarding it asked Russ who the hell Kaganori was. In response, he pulled out a nail gun and shot them both in the head. And since all they had were batons, they couldn't really do anything about it. Reeling in shock, Kaganori asked what the hell he was doing. Rust told him not to worry, that this was the only way out. They walked into the place and started heading towards the back. Once there, Rust swung open a metal door and they found themselves in a tight maze of corridors. And this is when Rust told him to run. They maneuvered around the claustrophobic space, taking out 2 more guards as they were scattered throughout. After a while, they started hearing distant yelling and footsteps behind them. Kaganori yelled at Rust to let him know what the hell was going on, but he was just told to be patient. He soon realized why, because about 20 seconds later, a thundering explosion could be heard from outside. As Rust would tell him later, he'd been spending his free time working on crude explosives with materials that he'd stolen from the factory. He'd been discreetly setting them up near the barrier walls, day by day, until it seemed enough to create a considerable entrance hole. A hole big enough for the creatures to get in. Eventually, they found themselves in a control room with a ladder leading upwards. There were 2 more guards in there, which Rust also took out. It was perfect because after that, he'd run out of ammo as well. They hurried up the ladder, sealing the entryway with scrap metal as they climbed onto a rooftop. And there was a helicopter just sitting there, about 10 meters away. This was the one that Rust had been commissioned to fix. You see, he'd been planning ahead for a while. Even though he'd essentially fully fixed it within the first few days he was there, he pretended like he hadn't. He did this in order to have more time to tamper with the controls, as well as asking around and trying to get a sense of what each button and lever did. In the back of his mind, he knew that flying away was the only way off the island. Eventually, on the 29th day, he'd figured it out completely. That's when he started planting the bombs. The thing is, even though he'd fixed the engine, it still took an exorbitant amount of time to power it up. About an hour and change. And that's why he needed a distraction. If he just sat in the aircraft waiting, the guards would have easily gotten to the rooftop in time and smoked him. But thanks to the explosion, now they were forced to deal with the horrors outside the walls. As Russ started up the helicopter, Kaganori looked down at the chaos that had plagued the city. Monstrous abominations were rampaging the place, killing everything in sight. The guards tried quelling the ungodly assault, but to no avail. At one point, a large crocodile-looking thing just started climbing up the walls to the roof towards them. It took Kaganori about 22 swings with a baton before it eventually decided to just crawl back down. About an hour passes before they start to hear banging coming from the rooftop entrance. It sounded like somebody was using a battering ram. Fortunately, the helicopter had taken off before they had to deal with it. As they ascended into the murky sky, Kaganori looked back down at the scene. As it turns out, Rust underestimated just how strong his explosives were. A huge chunk of the wall and the surrounding areas had been decimated. There wasn't even much movement on the ground anymore because everybody was either dead or in hiding. That's when it dawned on him that Rust had just inadvertently killed a lot of people. A lot of innocents, in fact. He was about to say something when Rust seemed to read his mind and stopped him. Those people down there, they didn't have lives worth living, he told him. I just put them out of their misery, man. Kaganori didn't try to argue with him. Deep down, he actually agreed. He just didn't want to admit it. They flew around for a few hours before he finally asked Rust where they were going. In response, he just sighed and said that he didn't know, but that anywhere would be better than Dusk Blue. Eventually they spotted an island and decided to descend. The engine needed to cool down anyways, so Rust thought that this was a better time than ever. The island itself was insane. Just off the flat shore stood mountains that apparently put Everest to shame. The whole place was full of them as well. At the base of the monumental Alps were what appeared to be vast open cave systems as well. They explored the place cautiously, not wanting to draw any attention to themselves, but it seemed that there was nothing on the island at all, just them. Rust told Kaganori to stay back and watch the helicopter while he explored the caves. While he initially objected to this, he figured that it'd be safer on the shore than in the darkness of the caverns. Rust put together a makeshift torch with some scrap wood and disappeared into the entrance. Kaganori said that he waited there for what felt like hours. He was starting to get worried, and eventually Rust finally surfaced from the dark. He seemed unharmed, but his expression told a very different story. He looked horrified. He was also holding what looked to be a small book. Kaganori asked him what had happened before Rust just handed it over. It was old and the cover was peeling off, but there was no denying what it was. It was a Bible. Kaganori had been Protestant for the longest time, so he'd essentially memorized the first few pages by heart. He read it over and, yeah, it lined up perfectly. Rust explained that he found it sitting in the middle of a crudely drawn symbol, like it was part of some kind of a botched ritual or something. And they just kind of sat there for a while after that. None of them had any words to say. This was a troubling revelation after all. Rust broke the silence though a while later. That wasn't it though. Apparently, he'd also seen cave paintings in there, along with pieces of what looked like torn manuscripts. He pulled them out of his bag, but they were all in Latin. Fortunately, Rust knew the language quite well. From what he'd pieced together, something happened in 2026 that sent the world spiraling into what we were in now. It was unclear, though, as to what this event actually was, though. The writings were all really vague, with words like corrupted and reborn popping up a lot. However, that wasn't even the most interesting part. The year 2014 also seemed to be significant. Rust's conjecture was that somebody had done something back then that took 12 years to fully manifest. Again, what really happened remained a mystery. All he had was the dates. There was one last significant thing, though, that he saw in there. A painting of a map on one of the cave walls. And it seemed to be the outline of the New World. Apparently, the only thing Rust could somewhat recognize was North America and East Asia. The other continents were torn into pieces. However, there was one small island that seemed to be worth noting. It looked to be on the equator line, around where South Africa would have been. There was an arrow pointing to it, connected to a single word, liberatio, the Latin word for deliverance. That's where we're headed, Rust exclaimed, and maybe there we'll find some answers. Kaganori asked him how the hell they were going to get there. I'll figure out a way, don't worry, was Rust's only response. Right after he said that, the ground beneath them started rumbling, and soon they figured out why there was nothing else on this island. They looked over at the mountains behind them, and they were shaking, but it didn't look like an earthquake. There was a pattern to it, almost as if they were being caused by footsteps. And eventually, they saw something moving in the distance. Something colossal. They didn't waste any more time hopping into the helicopter and getting the hell out of there. As they left the island behind, Kaganori watched as a creature around double the size of the mountains made its way onto the shore. Since it was obscured by some kind of mist, he couldn't make out the details, but it was humanoid for sure. What disturbed him the most was the bellowing laugh that it let out afterwards. The voice was deep and guttural, sending ripples throughout the sea below. It was also sinister in tone, like it knew what they had just discovered. After that, they flew around for a few more hours before Rust admitted that there was a problem. He didn't know how to get to the island depicted on the cave painting. He suggested that they scavenge another island in order to find materials for a compass. However, there didn't seem to be one in sight. They weren't low on fuel just yet, but that could change very quickly. The situation, though, got even worse when they flew into a brutal storm. Kaganori claimed that it happened so suddenly, and one second the skies were just dry, and the next they were filled with heavy winds and rain and lightning. It was inexplicable, but then again, in this world, that seemed to be the norm. It got so bad, in fact, that Rust told him to put on one of the parachutes just in case. There were no doors on the aircraft, after all. As it turns out, that was a very good call as well. As a particularly strong burst of wind tilted the helicopter to the side, Kaganori's fingers slipped from a railing that he was holding onto, and he fell out. As he made his harsh descent, he tried to gauge what he was heading into. However, the rain had gotten so bad that he could barely open his eyes. He made a swift judgment, waiting 10 seconds before ultimately opening the parachute. As he felt himself floating downwards, he started feeling the rain subside. He opened his eyes, being both surprised and relieved to find land waiting for him below. There seemed to be people on it as well, but as he got closer, he came to a horrifying realization. Those were not people, or at least not anymore, that is. He'd made it to Dead Man's Land. After landing, he freaked out and started running away from the hordes of zombies that had now focused their collective attentions on him. And eventually, he'd come across the settlement that we were in now. He'd been here ever since then too, going on regular hunting trips and establishing himself as a part of the community, but about a year ago he'd been captured by the psychos that we encountered yesterday. As it turns out, they were batshit crazy, and they took turns torturing and toying around with him, as well as the others that he was with for pure entertainment. At one point, they were driving out, planning on tying him to a tree and letting the zombies swarm him. Unfortunately, that was also when we crossed paths with them and saved him. He seemed to be getting lightheaded as he finished telling me this. The nurse told me that he needed more rest, so I let him be. However, he let me know one more thing before slipping out of consciousness again. I don't know if Rust is still alive. I don't know where he is. I don't know. I'm sitting here now, pondering the implications of Rust's discovery. If this really is the future, then what the fuck happened in 2026? How could that have led to this? What was on that island that Rust was trying to get to? Were we ever getting out of here? But like Kaganori, I guess I just don't know. Entry 33. I woke up this morning to heavy commotion. Everybody seemed scared of something, and I asked around, eventually finding out that some kind of a machine had been shot down over the island just a few minutes ago. I walked over to where they were keeping it. Smoker was already there, holding it in his hands. It was small and compact, looking extremely futuristic, which made sense now. I asked him what the hell it was, and he stared at me, eyes wide. Civitas, he uttered out. This is a scout drone, and they always send these before they're about to invade. Confused and shocked, I took a closer look at it. In big bold letters was the phrase, NC Military, written right on top of it. Fucking hell. Not sure what's going to happen next, but based off everything that's happened so far, it's going to be one hell of a time, for better or for worse. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.